say you wanna watch a drama. You say you wanna watch a comedy. Well, you can watch it with your mama, or you can watch it with your daddy.
You'll even sit and watch it with your middle schooler, so you can come and talk around a water cooler. We're watching all day and all night.
Couch potatoes unite.
Whoa, whoa.
Couch potatoes unite.
Whoa, whoa. Couch potatoes unite.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! Which is based on a blog of the same name because these, quote, violent delights have violent ends, end quote, at least when it comes to discussing the series we're about to discuss. My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground with something you like. For Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and the unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU, exclamation point, is kicking it summer style and hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays, and as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panelists and I live lives behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to the blog or the podcast via iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and via Google Play to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows around the water cooler, including, but not limited to, Stranger Things, iZombie, The X-Files, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., New Girl, The Originals, The Crown, Once Upon a Time, Orange is the New Black, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, 13 Reasons Why, A Series of Unfortunate Events, and Fuller House. Plus, new episodes are in the works, including revisits for Grace and Frankie, American Horror Story, Doctor Who, The Good Place, Gotham, Schitt's Creek, Arrested Development, Game of Thrones, Supernatural, Will and Grace. The Marvel's Defenders panel will talk Season 2 of The Punisher. The DCTU will revisit all 4 shows in the CW's Arrowverse, and the Star Trek 50 Plus series panel will cover Season 2 of the original series. We'll be launching new panels covering Jane the Virgin, The Americans, Riverdale, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Altered Carbon, Mr. Robot, and Charmed. And because we look back at shows now past, we'll be taking a smallish look back at a short-term show from some kind of yesteryear called Freaks and Geeks. We'll reminisce about the majesty of rain, and we'll revisit one of the all-time and most watched classic sitcoms, MASH, which was surprisingly popularly requested. By the way, did you know that CPU also from time to time goes live? We've been live from bunkers and comedy shows and Comic-Cons, and we just went live from Blue Breach Games to take a shiny look back at Firefly. Plus, we're planning more live appearances and other cool stuff. So make sure you like or follow us at our Facebook page, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or subscribe to the blog, our YouTube channel, our iTunes channel, our Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Play. In the meantime, if you don't hear a show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews, and we always seek new panelists. So if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any of those outlets I've mentioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback. Just don't try to take over our park. We will be gracious hosts to anyone, but the guests aren't always right, especially if they are mean. Today, we're around the water cooler and taking a first look at the first season of a science fiction western that quietly and sporadically airs on HBO. The show is Westworld, and this is the first of a 2-part miniseries in which CPU catches up on this unusual show, exploring complicated themes of humanity and consciousness, as well as conscience. In this episode, part 1 of this miniseries, we're discussing Season 1, which aired from October 2nd, 2016 to December 4, 2016, with a total of 10 episodes. We will discuss Season 2 in part 2 of our series. Westworld was created by Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy. Produced by HBO, it is based on the 1973 film of the same name, written and directed by Michael Crichton, and to a lesser extent, the film's 1976 sequel, Future World. The story takes place in Westworld, a fictional, technologically advanced Wild West-themed amusement park populated by android hosts, and that's in quotes. The park caters to high-paying guests, also in quotes, who may indulge their wildest fantasies within the park without fear of retaliation from the hosts, who are prevented by their programming from harming humans. In an unspecified future time period, Westworld, one of 6 theme parks owned and operated by Delos Incorporated, allows guests to experience the American Old West in an environment populated by these hosts, androids programmed to fulfill the guests' every desire. The hosts, who are nearly indistinguishable from from humans follow a predefined set of intertwining narratives, but have the ability to deviate from these narratives based on interactions they have with the guests. The hosts repeat their multi-day narratives anew each cycle. At the beginning of each new cycle, typically following the host's death, also in quotes, each host has its memories of the previous period erased. This continues hundreds or thousands of times until the host is decommissioned or repurposed for use in other narratives. For guest safety, hosts' programming prevents them from physically harming human guests. This allows guests nearly unlimited freedom to engage without retribution in any activity they choose with the hosts, including rape and murder. Staff, situated in a control center called the Mesa, which is connected to the park through vast underground facilities, oversee daily operations, develop new narratives, and perform repairs on hosts as necessary. Unbeknownst to the staff, members of a small group of hosts have retained memories of their past lives, in quotes, and are learning from their experiences as they gradually start to achieve sentience. The series has received largely positive reviews from critics, with particular praise having been given for its visuals, story, and acting. Westworld is a show that was popularly requested for discussion by some of our resident couch potatoes and couch potatoes adjacent. In fact, around the water cooler today are 4 of our frequent panelists, 1 brand new panelist, and your very involved moderator, all of whom are ready to welcome you to Westworld. As always, it should be noted that all of our panelists have watched all episodes of the series to date and may discuss sensitive plot points. So for those of you who have not watched any of Westworld and plan to do so at some point, listen at your own risk, as there may be major spoilers. And I have to say that this is a show that if you spoil it for yourself is probably going to be ruined for you. So extra special emphasis on major spoilers. At this time, I'd like to introduce the panel. This is how this works. For those who are returning, I'm reminding you. For the new panelist, I'm introducing you to the process and reminding our listener, of course. I'm going to ask each panelist to identify themselves by their first name, just their first name. You don't have to tell us your life story, but do tell us how you came to watch Westworld. What made you start watching? How'd you find out about it? What kept you watching? And then how would you rate your interest in Westworld? And this is specifically how you felt about the show after season 1, and this will be along our standard CPU character question, which changes with each show we do. Are you ready to answer these questions, panel?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Giddy up, really. So how would you rate your interest in Westworld after season 1? There won't be any weird impressions because it's a drama, so don't you worry. You are amazed by this show and adore it as you adore your own children. You believe the show is so much more than the creators originally conceived, and you are silently watching, titillated by what the future has in store, like Robert Ford. You find it breathtaking in its innocence, even as it's brave, intelligent, and full of surprises. You also believe that it asks the right questions, even if it doesn't always offer the right answers, like host Dolores Abernathy or guest young William. You find it to be a true breath of fresh air in an otherwise lifeless TV landscape. It's uncompromising in its quest to both teach and to learn, as well as to love and be loved, like host Maeve Millay. For you, the show is a pure expression and exploration of id, ego, and superego, heavy emphasis on the id. Westworld represents a land where anything is possible, and you're along for that complicated ride, like Logan Delos. You enjoy the show in its splendors, though your affection is highest for the charismatic lead character, like host Teddy Flood. You enjoy the idea of the park and some of the elements of romance in the story, but ultimately find yourself devoted only to 1 or 2 characters, like Maeve, like host Hector Escatone. You believe the story struggles with duality and can be out of balance, even as it explores intriguing questions about humanity, spirituality, and existence, like Bernard Lowe, aka Spoiler, Arnold Weber. You watch this show because your friends watch it, though your friends aren't always looking out for your best interests, like host Lawrence, aka El Lazo. You absolutely adore the dialogue of the park characters, but find some of the performances hackneyed, lackluster, and a disservice to some of the beautiful story concepts rendered by the Lee character, like Lee Sizemore. You only want to know Westworld's secrets. You have no bond or tie to the characters or the story. For you, watching is an investment in what lies beyond or beneath, like Charlotte Hale. For you, the show is an exercise in choice and consequence. It's utilitarian, even as it tests the boundaries of identity. You think the idea of a Westworld is rife with possibility as much as it is a playground for a God complex, which both intrigues you as it does frustrate you, like William, aka Spoiler, the Man in Black. I know. You don't care much for the story. Sometimes it's overcomplicated, but you love the action and the Western backdrop, as well as the strong female characters populating the ensemble cast, like host Armistice. You think the story is plainly dangerous. Westworld is a place that should never exist, even as it could be a frightening eventual future that threatens the security of the population, like Ashley Stubbs. You have no feeling about the show. In some ways, the endless cycle of death and rebirth has left you feeling like an empty shell, duped into believing what you were watching was more than the sum of its parts, like host Clementine Pennyfeather, or you hate it. You hate the idea of it at the end of the day. Sure, there are some redeeming features like the Bernard character, but for you, watching this was a job, one you were willing to take on at first with excitement, such as for the podcast, but which became tedious and at points confusing for you over time, like Teresa Cullen. That is just the main cast from season 1. Who would like to start?
I'm Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy.
I think I ran the gambit of every single character on that list at one point or another.
How did you come to start watching Westworld?
I have no idea.
Oh.
I don't remember how I started watching it because it's been so long waiting for the new seasons to come out and everything. So
I see he has feelings.
I do, and they're mostly frustrations.
Oh.
But I do really like the show, but like I said, I think I ran the gamut of every single character on that list. At points, I thought, wow, this is a really great cultural experiment almost. But other times, I thought it was very overly complicated for a lot of things. And I also thought with a lot of the characters, with them being, I don't want to say throwaway characters almost, because they can come back to life, I found myself less invested than if they didn't have that ability. But I'll keep watching. If they come out with season 3, what, a year and a half?
That is not what I expected to.
2020.
Yeah.
About a year. Welcome back, Jeremy. Jeremy currently appears on our 13 Reasons Why panel, and you gotta help me out.
Supernatural, Mr. Robot, Will and Grace.
Mr. Robot's not started yet,
Oh.
but Will and Grace, Supernatural.
He's
6 feet
pumping
under
up.
looking
He's
back.
pumping up a new.
Yeah, that's future advertising.
It is.
6 feet under.
You must be excited for that one.
I'm working my way through season 2.
Maybe not. Well, welcome back, Jeremy, just the same.
My name is Kyle. Hillary is my wife, and
She'll
the
be
moderator
talking.
is my sister.
I am
in-law.
Thank you.
I'm a huge horror movie fan, and the original Westworld is kind of considered like one of the pioneer killer robot movies.
Hashtag Pioneer Killer Robot.
Yep. Plus, I grew up with it just because I've watched pretty much everything horror from a small child. So the original it's amazing. If you haven't seen it with Yul Brynner, it's definitely top tier sci-fi horror. So I was going to watch the show no matter what, just because I had to see how they were going to top that. And based on this first season, I would say Ford. I really love this first season. It's going to change by the next one by a lot.
That's okay. We take the new temperature.
I love the cast. Some of my favorite character actors, like Jimmy Simpson, it was good seeing him be a lead. I forgot the actor's name, but Lawrence or Alonzo.
Yeah,
I love him, and I loved him in this show. It was great seeing all these people get bigger roles, and the action was great. And I couldn't, because I mean, when you know these robots are gonna go crazy, it's seeing where that's gonna happen and when. And I loved watching that unfold.
Welcome back, Kyle. Kyle is currently our 4th most involved panelist, owing to his vast devotion to comic book shows and some other things. Welcome back.
Hi, everybody. I'm Samantha.
Hi, Samantha.
Hi. I started watching the show because at the time I was devoted to all things that HBO does. They can do no wrong. And then about 10 minutes into the show, whenever that first round of Man in Black hauling Dolores into the shed happened, I was like, nope, not gonna do this. Shut it off. Did not continue watching. And then it wasn't until some friends of mine were watching it and were like, no, you need to give this another try. That I did. And throughout the first season, I think on my second chance at watching, I ended up being a Logan. Although I'm similar to Jeremy, where I kind of float around episode to episode, scene to scene on my feelings on this show.
Who did you say your character was? Because you turned away from your microphone.
I ended up being a Logan for the first season.
Okay. Welcome back, Samantha. Let's see, Samantha's been on Marvel's Agent Carter and our Gilmore Girls, and what have you joined? Grace and Frankie, Jane the Virgin will be after this.
She was on Friends.
Friends, yes, the big Friends
Friends.
panel, for sure.
Yes, so lots of fun panels.
And you also appeared live with us when we talked about Star Trek.
Yes.
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 That was lots of fun.
It was. You wore tribbles.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's listening, show up to a live one. They're even more fun.
I like that plug. Welcome back, Samantha.
I am Hillary.
Hi, Hillary.
What's up?
What's up?
Kyle mentioned me moments ago. I am
He
the
did the
wife.
disclaimer.
He did. I'm so proud of you. People, if you listen to the other podcasts with us, I always have to do it. So it's a fresh breath of air. With that being said, so I started watching Westworld because as Kyle is my husband, he was like, oh my gosh, I love the original movie and they're doing a show, so I'm going to watch it. You probably should too. And that's how a lot of these things go sometimes. Sometimes it's vice versa, and I'm really excited and then he watches it, but that's really the main reason I started to watch it. With that being said, I really love the first season, actually. I do agree a little bit with Jeremy. There were moments where I could easily put myself into various character descriptions that were made for it, for this podcast and all those purposes, but I'd say that for the most part, I'm Ford and a little bit of Dolores. I do really love the show. I think the acting, or at least for sure the first season, the acting is very spectacular in a lot of different ways. I do think that it has a fresh take on a way of doing a show. Not that other people haven't done similar shows that, I don't know, have the same kind of tone, I'm going to say, but overall, I think, at least in the first season, they've done a really good job weaving the story together to where it lands in the final episodes of the season. So I'm going to mostly say Ford and Dolores.
Welcome back, Hillary. Hillary joins Kyle, as she said, on many aforementioned panels, including all of our comic book shows just about, except Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They're against that one. But you also did Friends. But he also did Buffy.
Broadchurch, The X-Files. I'm losing track. Doctor Who. Lots of nerdy ones, though.
Yeah, Doctor Who.
I do like pretty much everything, but yeah.
A lot of nerdy ones. Welcome back, Hillary, my sister. We might fight. And our new panelist.
Hi, my name is Ben.
Hi, Ben.
Hi.
Welcome to CPU, Ben.
Thank you. Good to be here. I believe I started watching the show because it was the HBO drought between Game of Thrones.
That's how they got everybody.
The next big production by them. A lot of their other shows hadn't really drawn me in, but I've always liked sci-fi, science fiction type stories, especially ones relating to robots and the whole humanity and robot issues and everything. So at the end of the season, I've actually found myself relating, I guess, or choosing more like Bernard Lowe, aka Arnold Weber. Just really enjoying the duality and the changes among the characters and the major spoiler plot points and everything that occurred during it. And I thought they did a really good job tying all those up and weaving them together in a story. So
Welcome, Ben. And here, this is your first panel. Yeah, we hope you have fun. You've got a spicy group. And of course, my name is Kylie. I'm moderating and participating today, as is often the case. I started watching Westworld. Actually, this is one of the shows that I had learned was coming out. And I'm a huge science fiction fan generally. I have not seen the original movie, not for lack of wanting to, just haven't crossed paths with it, but I have not watched it. I knew that J.J. Abrams was an executive producer on this one, and I knew that Michael Crichton was the creator of The Source, and I also knew a lot of the cast that was going to be in it, including Anthony Hopkins and Ed Harris, and I pretty much was sold on that alone. And figured one day I'll watch this show. I didn't get sucked in the Game of Thrones vacuum, apparently, like some people. I might have, but I didn't. I actually started watching it officially because people requested it for the podcast. And that's sometimes how things happen. I kept watching this show because I actually really, really enjoyed this show. It's not my most favorite, but I do love the fact that it's very intelligent, and you have to stay engaged, and there are lots of clues and Easter eggs being laid, which I think, or hidden, which I think help you to understand, and maybe they're trying a little too hard in that vein, but at the same time, that's the kind of thing that entices me to a TV show. It's not turn your brain off TV. You definitely have to be in a mood to watch it, but I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it, and the cast is phenomenal. I don't think there's a weak link in the cast, so I definitely enjoyed that. And I also love the music, which we'll talk about. There's a very high and strategic use of music in this show, which I noticed from the get-go and loved, so I'm excited to talk about that. To that end, after season 1, I would be a Robert Ford / Dolores as well. I really was kind of amazed by it. It's breathtaking. The opening titles are really cool. Like, I'm very excited to talk about Westworld. So, welcome to the Westworld panel. Welcome to Couch Potatoes Unite discussion. Now, because this is our first look, we're taking a first glance at Westworld with this show. We now get to do the CPU standard star rating scale, or as Hillary, who's here at this panel, likes to call it, the star business. And this is how this works. We're going to go around the table. We're going to rate it on a star rating scale. You can choose fractions if you have to, but I average this out, so don't be too mean. If Spencer's listening, he knows what I'm saying. How would you rate? How would you rate Westworld? Now think of this in terms of, you can use any context, but since we're covering the first season, try to keep your thoughts focused on how you felt watching the first season. Is it 5 stars? Holy smokes, this is the greatest thing you've ever watched on TV since the history of time. It is the best science fiction TV show you've ever seen. You can't miss a single episode and you'll die without it. 5 stars. Is it 4 stars? It certainly seems intriguing and you're going to keep watching, but you see possible pitfalls in the premise. Is it 3 stars? You're going to give it one more try. There are things you've liked, things you haven't. You're kind of watching to see if the good things flourish as opposed to the things you don't like. Is it 2 stars? You only watched part of it, or maybe just season 1. Chances are you're mainly bored, but there's some intrigue or fascination that holds it together for you, no matter how unlikely, even though you haven't convinced yourself yet to keep watching, except maybe under duress for talking about it on this podcast. Or is it 1 star? Pass on this one, guys. It's a snoozer. It's not funny. It's not interesting. It's not intelligent. It's not your cup of tea. There's just way too many robots. I don't know why you're watching this. There are too many options to waste time watching this show.
They don't get that they're robots.
It's possible.
Those park employees put up with a lot.
To be fair, would we be doing a podcast if it was a 1? I don't think so.
To be fair, nobody has ever gone down to 1 star on the recording. However, we have had a 2.
I don't know. I might hit there for arrow.
Oh. That's for a DCTU podcast, which we already do. Right now we're talking about
spoilers for that one then.
Right now we're talking about Westworld. So rate it according to the star scale. Go.
4.
Okay.
Because I love this first season, but I still don't think I'd say it's the greatest thing ever, especially sci-fi in that. When you compare to like Star Trek or X-Files, it's just not that iconic to me. But it's still a great show this season.
Okay.
I can follow that. I would give season 1, quote unquote, season 1 4.25 or 4.5 stars. That will change for
4.25 is 4 1/4. 4.5 is 4.5.
So,
which one do you want?
4 1/4.
4
Okay.
3/8.
I know there's too many fractions.
9 3/4.
That's somebody different and not on the scale.
That will go down in the next recording.
So you're rating it 4 1/4 or 4?
Yeah, 4 1/4.
Why?
I found myself really hooked on season 1, actually. I wanted to watch the whole thing almost immediately. Up until the very end of season 1. I just wanted to know what was going on, what's happening, who are these people, what's going on, and it just drew me in a lot. I don't think it was any particular thing in the show that did it, just in general. The plot, the questions. I need answers. I need them now. That's how I felt all of season 1.
I'll give it a solid 4, no fractions.
Thank you.
Because the second time when I actually got into it, I binged the whole thing in a single day and could not stop watching. But again, as Jeremy mentioned, it is not the greatest thing ever. So that's what holds me back from additional stars.
So I'm going to basically copy Jeremy exactly. 4 1/4. I think I'm landing on. And yeah, I really like the first season for all the reasons we've already said, and we'll get into that more depth. The actors, the look of the show, the music of the show. I wanted to know what was going to happen. That was what the main draw was. It's still not my favorite show. You literally just asked, like, I just did a little bio of what my favorite show is right now. It's not that one, but I still really, really enjoy it. And I enjoy all all of the aspects of it for the most part. So 4.25.
Because Kylie worked up the 5-star rating to such stellar levels, I'm going to have to go with a 4.5. Because I was initially thinking, yeah, the first season, I really enjoyed that. But the way she described it, I can't say it was that.
You can't say holy smoke?
No, I can't say holy smokes. The biggest thing about it that drew me in and that I loved throughout the whole thing was the same thing that...
Jeremy,
thank you. That's what I was going to say, but I thought it was going to say...
You'll get to know each other.
It was the same
well.
thing, the mystery. I wanted to know what was happening. I wanted to know how everything was intertangled and working and where the story was going. Obviously, it was going towards killer robots, but how was it getting there?
Yeah.
What was the lead up? What was the
Who are
secrets
these
that
big characters?
Ford had? That who was Arnold? You know, they talked about him a lot, and the different points that came out on that were very, very good and kept me interested throughout the whole thing. I don't know if I watched it the night of every night, but I definitely watched it like the day after as I could. So
I will give it 4.5 stars as well. It is not my favorite either. My immediate reaction when I was watching it was A, I love the mystery, but B, I don't see how they can sustain this over the course of several seasons. Some of that has been somewhat allayed by the fact that the show has kept going, but that was my initial reaction, like, okay, this is a really good concept, which helps that they based it on a movie, but how much further can they go with it? And so that was my number one thing. The pacing is also pretty slow, so you have to kind of be willing to attach yourself to that pacing. However, it's also very consistent. So once you're used to it, I think it goes fine, but if you're not into not turn off your brain TV, you have to keep yourself engaged and it's already kind of slow, I would want to warn you that that's what you're walking into with Westworld. It's slow, it's deliberate, it's thoughtful, and it's complex. That being said, I loved it after season 1 because of the mystery. I love everything I said earlier. Love the cast, love the premise, love the story, love the little touches, and we'll talk about that. But I'm not at 5 stars, holy smokes, either. I'm definitely 4.5 stars. So, and maybe I did oversell the holy smokes a little bit. Okay, but that's just part of the animation. So, now let's talk about Westworld Season 1. You can kind of address whether you liked it right away or didn't like it right away. I think Samantha kind of talked about that with her experience. But what is interesting is that each of the seasons for Westworld have their own subtitles, and in Season 1, the subtitle was The Maze. So if you've watched Season 1, you know why that is. Basically, address, what did you like, what didn't you like, did you have to get used to it, what were the story points that kind of you connected with, you didn't connect with. Talk about Season 1, and I'll ask questions as needed.
I liked the repetitive plot straight away because it makes you notice that you have to pay attention to what's happening. And it provided that consistency throughout the whole season of sort of a cornerstone to go back to.
No, I agree with that statement because I think, again, that lends itself to the whole needing to know what's going to happen with that mystery. I mean, that's clearly deliberate, like you said. It's planned out that way, so those are the urgencies that you feel while you're watching it. And she said she turned it off with that first... Did you say the first moment with the man in black? You turned it off?
Yeah, when
he drags her into the barn.
Like hauling her into the shed, and it was like, I don't need some sort of gratuitous violence.
I get that.
So that turned me off in the moment, and it took friends saying like, no, you need to get past that because there's more to this show than just that. So I was glad I had revisited it because it's like, okay, if you can get past some of that, and the first time I was watching it, I didn't realize that they weren't truly going to show anything, but I didn't want to witness that trauma.
No, I get it. I mean, I don't like usually watching a lot of those scenes either, but at the same time, I was like, man, this man in black, I really need to know what the hell is going to happen with this guy.
That's part of the most interesting thing is the inversion from the original too, where the man in black is the main killer robot. So if you're invested in this franchise, you automatically go there and like, what's his deal going to be in this version? He's the face of the franchise because there's 2 movies and a TV show already, and Yul Brynner was amazing in the original. So how are they going to top that? And I like the fact that he's not a host. He's human.
But he's a human with a lot of issues.
Yes. And I would say both versions of him are amazing.
There's still lots of hints to that, though, in season 1. Like you said, if you're paying attention to the complexity of it, there is lots of foreshadowing to it. So it's not... I think it's still kind of important that we talk about it. Plus, Ed Harris is just, awesome.
I don't know...
So is Jimmy Simpson, the younger.
Yes.
The younger one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what this says about me, but the Man in Black is my favorite character.
I don't think that says anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
I
normal.
think in the first season he was my favorite.
Yeah, young William is my absolute favorite character.
Young William, definitely. I was rooting for him, and then the sudden change was a very big twist.
But I also like the Ed Harris version.
Yeah.
Because Ed Harris
I think that more to do with Ed Harris than almost anything else, because I agree.
Yeah, well... Yes, for sure. Ed Harris is just truly one of our time's most amazing actors. Yeah, he's so good, and there really is not a performance that I have watched that I don't like him in. But at the same time, there's a lot to hate about the Man in Black, and I don't think that I could have achieved that without A, his performance, and B, what the story they're trying to tell around the Man in Black. Again, don't know the original story, so I was very, very intrigued by his progression and the twist to find out that young William was actually Man in Black prequel.
But it was so
Spoiler!
Once you learn that, because you're like, oh my gosh, that contrast throughout the whole season, it was really important to see that contrast because you're seeing where he started and where he is now.
Well, and you almost, as the audience, have the same sense of horror Dolores has when she realizes that the person she spent all this time waiting for is also the person she's most terrified of.
Yeah. We also need to talk about Evan Rachel Wood because, holy crap. Normally, I don't love her in a lot of different things.
Agreed.
And, I mean, you outright hated her in True Blood.
Because that was easy. That was not a good role for her, and then she was terrible in it.
Dolores, I mean, I love all the complexity of that character, even though she's, one of the original robots. But I'm just...
Hosts.
Sorry. I want to say robot. Stop putting me in a box.
Fine.
No. But really, she did an amazing job to the extent that, I mean, and when a character really impacts somebody, as somebody who goes to Comic-Con a lot, the moment people, the season wasn't even over and people are already going there in droves in cosplay as Dolores, and you know what I'm saying? That's
before
how
the show even hit.
Yeah,
people
it's
were just so
that's
excited.
how you can see that already there's an impact in how well it's been acted because people immediately want to express their love of it.
Well, and Dolores isn't all she appears to be either.
Which is why she's super cool.
Well, the way they handle those transitions of how they switch from, I guess you could bucket them and say good to bad, just visually, like the Man in Hat change, and just how she goes from being very innocent and confused to fully realized. It's just a very slick way of going about those reveals.
There were a lot of twists in the first season. Probably quite a few more twists than in the second season, which may contribute to people's changing opinions or not. I don't know. But we can definitely talk about those twists. We will be talking about the second season, but...
For me, one of the biggest things was all the Easter eggs to the movie that they put in there. When I was going into this, I was wondering how it was if it's just going to be a retelling of the movie or what, but it's actually both. It's a sequel and a retelling. Dolores' first rampage in the town where they bury everything, it fits the timeline of the first movie. So it fits in perfectly. They even show the Man in Black in that time period. The original Man in Black, I should say, Yul Brynner. And the very first shot, the basement in Delos, where all the decommissioned are, it's the lobby from the movie.
Oh.
So you can see it's the same company, it's the same park. It's just years later, 40 years later.
Yeah,
so is it a continuation?
It's a continuation. Her first rampage fits the timeline back when, because in the movie it's the Clockwork almost robots. And they show that's when her first rampage took place before they made him more biological. And she has a memory when she was going down it before her rampage. when she has a memory going down when Arnold and Ford are arguing. And you see the Yul Brynner robot, and it takes place, and the aesthetic is almost 1970s aesthetic, so it matches up with the movie, even though it's still the future. And that's right before she goes on her rampage, and it fits perfectly as a little telling of why. Because in the first movie, there's no explanation. The robots just go crazy, and then it cuts to end. Nobody knows. So this one gave a really cool idea of how this happened, and then a really cool sequel of what would what if they didn't close down the park, and they just tried to fix the bugs and hide it, and then move forward. Which in a lot of ways is cooler than the sequel movie that they made, Future World.
So what you're hearing right now is what I experience when I'm watching these shows sometimes. Because Kyle gets very giddy while he's noticing these things happening, and we are watching them together. But it makes it more fun, too.
I had a thought and it just left.
Sorry.
I think
I'm still unpacking everything you said about the combo of the movie and the show, and now I'm like, whoa, I gotta go back and watch the movie.
Thank you. That made it come back. So, see, that's one of the things, though, that I noticed, and it probably becomes more evident in the second season, but you still get that sense of it in the first season, is that the show, the story is the chronology, the timeline. They play fast and loose with it. They jump back and forth. So there's a sense of disorientation with that. And there were times in the first season when I was confused. Like, where are we right now? Or more when are we? Because,
yeah.
I mean, obviously you learn things about the characters. Some of them aren't time dependent, but some of them are. And you're like, when did this happen? Did I miss it? Usually by the end of the season I was going, wait a minute, did I miss that? Which I'm sort of skirting around because we're not there yet. But so to the fact that this is even happening with the movie Easter eggs, I would never have noticed that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so layered that for them to still work in all that fan service to people that grew up with the movie is amazing.
Well, good for them. The biggest thing that we learn in season 1, what we're getting is the sense of the park. I've already mentioned in the intro that there's this recycling of time. You get to see several iterations. Samantha referred to that as well. Several iterations where each day brings new discoveries. You see the program start over. Sometimes you're seeing the program start over in the past. Sometimes you're seeing the program start over in whatever you think is present or future. You just don't know. You also are introduced to a bunch of different characters, and I feel like we should maybe take the characters in groups, and that will help us with the conversation. So if we're talking about the Mesa, which is where they're working on and programming the hosts, and you get to, they're all usually naked there. Yeah, there's a basement. You get to meet Robert Ford, who is the creator of the park. You get to meet Bernard, who's kind of his primary programmer. He has an assistant named Elsie, who's kind of a little spitfire, doing the things up there. And there's a lot of talk in the first, I'd say half of the season, if not third of the season, about these reverie codes. This sense of something that Robert is programming into the hosts, which Bernard and Teresa, who's kind of like the business manager, has concern with. So we'll take that group. How did you feel about that group and that part of the story?
So very corporate.
Okay.
It just makes me sit back and be like, all of those sort of company politics never change. Future, past, what they're talking about, and that not everyone being on the same page.
I totally agree with you. Totally corporate. Robert Ford, man, you can see where all of his motivations lie. And I get it. I mean, you've put a lot of work in. Plus Anthony Hopkins. Like, you don't want to get in a fight with him. He can be scary.
Are you making a Hannibal reference?
No.
Okay.
he just has that, I don't know. I mean, I think that he plays the character very well. Of course, he's Anthony Hopkins. But I just think there's times where there's that insinuated level of intimidation, and it comes through. Also, I would not want to be in the basement with any of the hosts because it's creepy and scary down there.
It is creepy,
especially when Maeve like sits up in the middle of it. Yeah, I would run out of screaming.
As I said, those employees. I mean,
hazard pay.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying. Like that's to me. I mean, you're expecting it to happen, but there's still that level. And I don't really get scared by things. I was watching things I was way too young to be watching, but it's like one of those things that you still have that level of uneasiness. I think they did a good job of translating that through each scene.
All of that pretty much goes back to the source material and Michael Crichton's ongoing theme that we've reached a point in our technology where we just doing it because we can. We don't even understand what we're doing. We don't understand what we're putting into it or what it's capable of.
Oh, true.
It's kind of a comic
which, yeah, Jurassic Park was his sequel to Westworld.
Yeah. Was?
It was a sequel?
Yes. Well, essentially a thematic sequel. It's a park of bioengineered versus a park of... Because everyone asked him for years to do a sequel to Westworld. So he came up with what he wanted to see, something more biological, because genetics and everything was becoming the new scary thing over robotics.
Hashtag dinosaurs.
But it's the same basic principle, man messing around with things he doesn't understand. And even, I keep going back to the original movie, there's a scene where the robots start to mess up, and the head of the park's asking the engineers what's wrong, and like, we don't know. We had computers build these robots. We don't know what's in them. And so and it's amazing that it still fits today. We're still doing it.
Well, that's what I think is kind of amazing. You're both kind of hitting on it a little bit. We're talking about these same thematic elements. The movie came out in 1973. We are now 46 years later.
Oh, you mean people don't learn their lessons? Is that what you're saying?
Or that humanity
Somebody
has
do the Ian
scary?
Malcolm monologue.
Right.
Do the what monologue?
Ian Malcolm. You're so busy. I'm not going to do it. Everyone's staring at me now.
You're so busy determining if you could do it, you never thought of stop to think if you should.
Yes.
Yes, that one. Thanks, Ben.
A cautionary tale.
It is.
Well, and it feels suddenly relevant again. Or if it never stopped being relevant, it's more relevant now again.
Plus, there's always got to be the creepy guy down in the basement who's taking advantage of the host and doing. Yes, you knew it was going to happen, but that is humanity, and that is what some people do in those situations, and it's not shy about it. It puts it right out there for you.
In those kind of scenes, the line that kept going through my head is, "Do you want killer robots? This is how you get killer robots."
Exactly.
So that's the Mesa. Then we have the actual hosts. So there's several we meet. We meet Dolores, of course. We've already mentioned Evan Rachel Wood's character. We meet Teddy, her love interest. We meet Maeve, who's kind of the madam who runs the saloon.
Go Maeve.
Played by Piette. She's honestly one of my favorite characters, yeah. She's a little bit more self-actualized than a lot of them, and becomes more so over the course of this season. We meet her. We also meet Dolores' father, who gets decommissioned pretty quickly, and I'm trying to find his name. But
Abernathy?
Abernathy,
that's their
there
last
you go.
name.
That's their last name.
But they always called him that. I can't remember what his first name was.
Peter. It's Peter Abernathy. Ha-ha! So you have the hosts. Those are kind of the main hosts. Then you've got some of the others, like Clementine you meet in the saloon. Armistice, she's one of the gang. You meet Hector, who is... Rodrigo Santoro plays him.
So hunky.
He's pretty, yeah.
He is kind of pretty. I know.
He's the cute guy in Love Actually, too.
Or the ugly guy in 300. Xerxes.
I hated that movie. Sorry, I'm a girl. I just didn't like John Henry.
No, don't box people in, man.
All right, I hated 300, and I remember nobody in it. And if he died quick, even
he
more
looks
so.
completely different.
Okay.
It's the takeaway.
Isn't he the guy on Lost, too?
Yes.
Yeah, he's one of the guys on Lost that everybody hated until they killed him.
Yeah, because it's one of the throwaway characters on Lost. But
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, I can't remember their names, but the season 3-2 that appeared and everybody hated.
They were like the replacement for like...
the diamonds and...
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm having so many epiphanies tonight.
I know.
Classy can help you out.
Westworld brings out all of the truth.
Appreciate it.
He is pretty. So what did you think about the hosts?
I thought they were the most interesting part of the show. I thought that was part of the main draw that kept bringing me back to season 1, like over and over again. Like, I should say, episode after episode in one singular night, was the host. I just wanted to know what was going to happen with them. I thought Maeve, in particular, her storyline was my favorite out of all of them, because she's just take no crap kind of girl after the first couple episodes, and get to see her kind of let loose and show them what's up.
Well, this sense of sentience and consciousness really becomes real with her.
She hasn't been messed with as much as Dolores. Like, they've been messing with Dolores because she was one of the original hosts. So they've done all sorts of reprogramming and deleting and all sorts of stuff. But with Maeve, like, they probably didn't expect it from her.
Maeve reached it quicker because of trauma, whereas Dolores was slow build-up of repetition.
Well, because she's trying to piece together everything. I mean, it's like Dolores knew something the whole time was off, but it was a slower build because she's gone through a longer stream of it, I think, instead of, like you said, or whoever said it, the instant.
Well, Kyle said it, the trauma.
Okay.
The trauma of losing the daughters. So that's the big pieces of Maeve's storyline we learn is that she had a previous life as sort of a prairie mother with a daughter, and the show's answer to Native Americans is called Ghost Nation in this Western world, and they come and kidnap the daughter. And as Maeve is becoming more aware and more sentient and possibly faster than Dolores, although there are circumstances that lead to that. That's what she remembers first, is the missing daughter, and how she needs to get back to the missing daughter. But then the question becomes, did Maeve arrive on that on her own, or were these reverie codes the trigger?
I love how she always brings us back full circle.
That's why I'm moderate. And I've stumped the room too. What do you think, guys?
Like it's a combination.
Yeah, I agree with that statement.
Of the repetition and the reveries. Because if it was just that, I think she wouldn't be going as far back in her memories. Listeners can't see me using the air quotes, but I am.
They'll trust you.
I do that all the time. It's
Well,
okay.
and first with her, they have the revelation that there's a code in her telling her to do all these things, and she's not quite as sentient as she seems. But the key scene, though, is she's programmed to actually leave the park, and when she stops at the train and turns around, I think that's her really gaining full sentience and full freedom.
That's true. Good point. She does try to leave the park and is held back from leaving the park. But we don't find out why for sure until season 2.
I guess in my mind I would know more if it was the reverie code or if it was her herself, if you kind of knew whether the life with the daughter was her first iteration or if there was stuff before that. If it was stuff before that, I would think it was the code telling her when to go off track. If it was her first one, I think I would tend to say it'd be more Maeve herself.
I get the sense that was her first life, was the one with the daughter.
And that's what I got too, but I just thought, throw it out there as a thought.
That is a thought.
You never know.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to think more into the complexity of it, for sure.
Like,
But
where was she in the movie? I guess
She wasn't.
I know, but I'm saying in the timeline kind of thing.
Yeah, because
You started this, Kyle.
Yeah. I mean, I would assume that was her first life, because the guy that writes the stories for the park tells her you were wasted.
Lee.
He tells her that she
The
was
haughty
wasted
Lee.
in that life because she's better as the mistress.
Yeah.
Which she is.
Well, I always wonder about the crossover of characters between the worlds. So, was that her first Westworld life and she existed in another world before that?
I don't know, because they don't really start exploring the other worlds in depth until season 2. We get hints. There's definite foreshadowed things, like they find a map of sort of this larger park system, but it's never really delved into until the second season when they actually show us one of the worlds, and I don't think she was in that world originally. It's just a copycat of Westworld after all. But that's for the season 2 discussion.
Right. True.
Season 1, I really liked Teddy.
Yes, James Marsden.
Yes, I mean, and he's almost our first introduction to the world in that when he gets off the train and him interacting with everybody. Plus,
He's kind of pretty too.
Yeah.
All the straight guys in the room are like, what? Sure.
But I mean,
you can
I
also
love-
appreciate.
I love James Marsden and everything he's in, so it was great seeing him. And I like the idea of him being the good cowboy versus the man in black. And I couldn't wait to see them because you know that they're going to collide.
They collide pretty quick on in the show.
Yeah.
He loses, but if you think about it, Teddy kind of represents how William, the man in black, used to be and used to think.
Yes.
And so he sees him, he tells him he's a perpetual loser, and I think that was
him talking to his
reflecting
old
on
self.
himself.
The doormat self.
Yes, and he might have even programmed, or had them program Teddy towards that reflection. He's the weak hero cowboy who will always lose against the villains and in the stories and everything.
Kylie
But
did
he's-
mention duality.
Yes.
Yeah, but even still, even with that, I mean, I think he comes more into his realization in the next season, but even still, he's still doing he's still coded to do those things, but to some degree, it's almost like you can get that hint of he's still doing it, because he wants to do it.
Yeah,
he wants to be there for Dolores and all of that. I mean, you can see that, and I think that James Marsden does a really good job of portraying that innocence. Especially you're supposed to fall into the time period, too, so you're coming up against, if you're coming up against the man in black, that's just, I wouldn't want to. Would you? No.
Honestly, even if Westworld existed in this world, it wouldn't be the kind of world I'd want to go to.
Especially not at those prices.
No, right? I can't afford this crap. So to even get to the question of would I want to come up against the man in black, I don't think it'd be a problem. Now, if they had a sci-fi fantasy kind of world and there was a man in black equivalent, we can revisit this question. I'm looking forward to seeing if we see other worlds, but that's for later. So that's the hosts, and then we also have sort of the corporation, if you will. We have Teresa as the business manager who's also Stupping Bernard.
That doesn't end well.
It sure doesn't.
Awkward.
We have Charlotte, Valkyrie from the Avengers movies, Thor and all that stuff. Charlotte comes in as sort of almost the man in black for the corporation. She's coming in to clean up everything because they think Ford is off the rails, that he's gone completely way away from the business. And then, of course, we get the flashbacks to the older times, the past times, young William being the man in black in his early days with the company, and then Logan, who we find out is Logan Delos, the son of the owner of the corporation that owns the park. So what do we think about that population?
I just think it's interesting to watch young William go through his transition. They really delve into that in the first season. It's interesting to watch because there's a moment where you can literally see he has full affection for Dolores.
He loves her.
He loves her.
Like real.
Like, I know. And it's interesting, and that's the question. That would probably happen. Again, we're just human, right? I mean, yeah, we know, our brains know what they are, but in reality, how could you stop yourself from that sort of interaction? If you feel it's that real, that's the whole point of it. And it's kind of sad when, again, he comes to that realization, and when he keeps revisiting it as the man in black, and I love when he says, "Oh, good old Dolores, you remind me of everything and where I started." Like, he literally says that to her. I just love all of those moments that happen throughout the season. It was impactful to me.
Well, there's so much about, like, everyone has an agenda, and trying to figure out what the true agenda of each of those characters is interesting, because it's not always obvious.
For sure.
To that effect, talking about the secret agendas, never really touched on, they kept even before the hosts were, without the reveries, acting up and going off the rails, they were finding different hosts that were places where they weren't supposed to be. There was, I think, the one from the camp who wandered off and fell into a ravine, and it's because someone in the company was trying to repurpose him to transmit secure data outside of there, and you kind of find that whole corporate espionage, and you're trying to figure out, is it someone outside the company trying to learn what they did here to steal it? Kind of like the Jurassic Park idea of stealing the corporate secrets.
Through Newman.
Yeah,
through Newman and others through
always
there.
bites you in the butt. Don't do it.
Spits poison in your eyes.
But yeah, I mean, it just goes to show you the corporate world is the real enemy, and they're so much colder than these robots. The robots have so much more humanity. I mean, even just like Hale is the biggest example of that. She is the complete villain, essentially, doing every horrible thing you can think of. And then the hosts are, you can root for them. They have reasons and passions and these whole lives.
Yeah, exactly. You end up feeling sorry for the hosts. You're like, they're the cool characters.
Which is also hit on the head through Ford. Ford clearly has a better estimation of this creation. Even though it's kind of mired by his God complex, he still sees them as humanity's future, or the best parts of humanity, as opposed to the actual humans he's forced to work with, construct these beings with, and the business side of this park that has really, and I think in his mind, he's the quintessential creative. They're a necessary evil to make his dream a reality, but at some point he's convinced he's going to shed that evil. He just doesn't necessarily do it in the first season.
Well, we haven't talked much about Bernard.
Talk about Bernard. I was just going to transition into the twists because there were 4 big ones. One of which we've already covered, which is William to the Man in Black. But would you like to talk about Bernard, Hillary? That's another twist.
I would like us all to talk about Bernard.
You start! Go!
I really didn't see it coming that it was going to be Arnold. Did anybody else see that coming?
No.
No, they did a very good job of...
Yes.
They didn't talk enough about any other characteristics about Arnold other than how he cared about them.
The relationship with Ford and how...
And the dodges, how they would dodge away from showing you a picture of Arnold or like show his face.
Yeah, and so you kind of got that idea of he's someone different, and I kind of thought he might have like turned himself into a host or put himself into the system somehow. But it was much more of a twist when it was, Ford brought him back because he wanted him to be there. And in a way, you talked about Ford's God complex. That was kind of, he could never really control Arnold, and Arnold really was the creative driving
Yes.
force behind creating the hosts and was the reason they were able to exist. Ford was
So
intelligent, but more of
yeah.
the business in a way. So Ford kind of transitioned more to a blend of them, and I don't know if that was because he made Bernard/Arnold and started to understand him more, and there was having an influence on him even from his grave and everything. So
Well, I mean, and that's always
Interesting to
like
consider.
that. Yeah, well, it's always like that. I mean, a lot of times you hear about those stories in corporations anyway. There's the driver of the business, and then there's the creative mind behind the business, and how those two things clash, and when it becomes as big as it is for a Westworld park, and then you're because it's almost like you were describing it, like Ford regretted a lot of what had happened with the whole series.
Well, and that's why I love Ford's art, because Arnold sacrificed himself to give these hosts another level of consciousness. He did it too early. And the idea that so many years later Ford realized that Arnold was right, and he completely flips on his original opinion about the host, and he ends his arc the same way Arnold did, just he's much more successful.
So the twist that we're hinting at that we haven't actually said is that Bernard is a host who is modeled after Arnold, one of the original founders of Westworld and the concept of the hosts.
But what makes it more impactful is that the whole time you almost feel like one of the more calming aspects in the show or characters is Bernard.
Jeffrey Wright is
Yes.
amazing.
He did an excellent job.
yeah.
And in the scene where he kills Teresa,
Oh
like you
my
can see in his
gosh.
face how much he doesn't want to be doing this, but his body, he can't control himself. I mean, that acting was amazing. Like, that is the most emotional scene for me in this whole season.
He is, I feel like, the anchor to every episode. If they're
Yeah, that's a
Everybody-
good way of saying it.
Yeah, everybody does a great job, but because he does have that sort of even almost internal struggle, but you're watching the internal struggle.
But you don't realize what you're watching.
Not at first,
No.
for sure. Not until the twist comes, and then you're like, what? What? I mean, I think he is amazing in this show, as much as Ed Harris, and maybe I was too quick to say The Man in Black was my favorite, although I don't necessarily like Bernard's trajectory after a while, but Jeffrey Wright he's just truly amazing in this. I don't think I've seen him in something I like him better in, to be quite honest. This is one of his best roles.
It's just the subtleties in their interaction, like when they're sitting in the mesa together, like he's sitting there across from Dolores, and it's like he cares about her too. They both care about, because she is one of the, or she is the original, and those moments where he's, it's like you can feel his heartbreak a little bit, but also the necessity of what he's doing. It is very complex, and I think they do a good job of just making it come to life for the audience.
And he's such a tortured character, but he's not whiny or really over the top about it.
No.
It's very nuanced, and like you can see the agony in his eyes, but he just keeps going.
So that's a twist. We have that twist. Bernard's a host. We have Bernard's model of Arnold. We have young William is actually the Man in Black, 30 or 40 years before we see the Man in Black. And then the final twist, which I also did not see coming, maybe not until like 5 minutes before they said it, which is Dolores. Her actual identity is the rebellious Wyatt, who they make reference to throughout the whole first season as this rival gang, evil, villainous, sort of the cops and robbers set up, and they're the bad guys, and you're like, who is this Wyatt? And of course you have this, I don't know, maybe it's internalized sexism, but I envision Wyatt to be a man. You don't know who
Me
Wyatt
too, but
is.
I think they allude to her being a man as Wyatt, just in the way that they talk about the character.
Could be.
And sure, it's sexist, but it kind of fits the
I mean,
character.
they're definitely trying to misdirect you.
Yeah, it's misdirection. And I think it's misdirection
Yeah.
for the characters and the guests, too. The hosts and the guests, because she is more sentient at points that we meet her than what we are led to believe when we first meet her.
Yeah.
And so we learn by the end, by the season finale of the first season, that she is actually this mastermind, Wyatt, who is manipulating the robots into an insurrection. Killer robots into an insurrection. The very killer robots previously mentioned. So what did we think of that twist?
I think she's awesome. I'm on her
Because she
side.
goes from being so innocent to just totally badass.
Yeah.
Well, and talk about, again, duality. She had two very extreme sides of a personality.
Which I think was important for her gaining her sentience, falling somewhere in between the two.
And I think part of why it took her so long to get there is because it was getting those two to meld and meet in the middle.
I mean, they essentially buried the Wyatt in her after the first rampage.
Yeah, and I think throughout the whole season, she is going off on her own by herself, but she's remembering the events that happened.
She's reliving her first
past.
adventure with William.
It's
where she
happening
went out
because
and
she's
journeyed
not
that
being
far.
controlled as much in those moments. So that's how it's being allowed to happen. They've controlled her so much that's...
Yeah, and she makes the journey to the church, and
Yeah.
that's where they had
That's
the
her
basement
come-to
in the
moment.
church, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Where she was talking with, as we find out later on, it was Arnold, not Bernard, where there were at times in the show when you're
What?
like, when did Bernard have time to pull her out of wherever
While
she
he's
was
in the middle of this crisis.
to talk to her while he's dealing with all this corporate crisis, and wasn't he like suspended or something at times? So it really like pulled it all together, because you started to think like, oh, maybe Bernard is like a secret person trying to go against the company, or he has his own agenda, and it turns out he's just kind of the pawn in Ford's agenda. So again, one of those big twists for it. So
Yes. Oh, that's more season 2. We learned that in spades.
they kind of definitely
They
did that on
hit
top,
that.
but
Yes.
he's definitely shows as like Ford's
They do-
patsy scapegoat, because
Yeah.
he uses him. I can't remember the exact details, but I know he uses him at one point to take the blame for something.
Yes,
Ford
he does.
did.
There's
He
a
does.
couple of things
I thought
that
it was
he has.
Well, and
for
there's the
I thought it
implication
was
that Ford
for
has
the
had him
reveries.
murder.
Yeah.
They had the implication that
was.
Ford has had him murder
And that was
multiple
in season
people
1.
throughout the
Yes,
years.
Yes.
Well, including Teresa.
Yeah.
Ford
Yeah.
is the
So when you
trigger for
see,
that.
and then he's like, "Is that the first time you made me do that?" And then Ford, very obviously lying, is like, "Of course not."
Which is why I'm like...
Well, it just goes to show you it's all a matter of perspective of, are you ever really in charge, or are you always a pawn? Because it depends on who's influencing you. So even when Bernard thinks he's in charge of everything as Ford's right hand, he's really just being manipulated.
What did you think? The season is subtitled The Maze. And really, I think the season subtitles follow the objective that the Man in Black is trying to chase down. So in the first season, the Man in Black is obsessed with this maze. You keep
Which
seeing
ironically isn't for him.
Right. You keep seeing this image, this symbol that looks very like a maze popping up all over the park, whether it's inside the skulls of scalped androids to on walls and different pieces or props in the park. What did you think about that concept?
I was always confused on why it was under the scalps.
Yeah, like why did Arnold put it there when all it has to do is them gaining consciousness? Why put a physical representation of it where no one's going to see it?
Maybe that's the code of the programming. Maybe that's where he hid it. I don't know things. I'm just guessing, Kyle.
I saw it more watching the second season, because they gave clearer views of it. The maze itself, the center part of it really looks like, what is it, the Da Vinci's Man, where it's the spread eagle man spread out. And with the maze going around it, it almost seems like it was the idea of guiding them more towards becoming fully realized as humans and everything, which is why the Man in Black was told it's not for you, and it's not for him, because he is a man. He doesn't need to find his
but he's just
humanity
so
and everything.
narcissistic. Like, he thinks everything is about him.
Yeah,
The
in
whole park was
reality,
made for him.
Yeah.
well, and the funny thing is, you spend the whole season wondering what the maze is, but you don't realize you're watching it. Dolores' whole trip is her trip through the maze.
Yes.
It's just, and then you repeat the
very
maze and you repeat the
symbolic.
maze, and you don't realize you're watching it the
Literally
whole time.
and figuratively.
And I just love that moment when he digs up the grave and it's just a little toy, and it's just like essentially laughing at him.
So I'm really not far off. There's programming in that. You guys are getting to the thematic, like, this is the point of it, much better than I did.
Oh.
I was like, what is that maze?
Well,
I'm too distracted by all the things.
But yeah,
It's
essentially that's what
probably-
it is, though, because Arnold realized he thought it was just like a straight line, like a steps of consciousness. But then right before he died, he realized that they would have to go through it so many more times before they start to make their own decisions, not branched off programmed
because he
decisions.
wanted them to.
Because he realized it's all about essentially building up a subconscious that they're not aware of. And that's what the maze is.
Kyle, you blew my mind. That happens a lot.
He's a smarty.
He is a
I just
smarty.
read too much sci-fi.
No,
I like a lot of sci-fi
don't
too,
downplay
but
it. You're a smarty.
I think you also like this story a lot, and you're also more acquainted with it. That's true.
Yeah.
Whereas I was brand new, so a lot of the stuff was like overstimulation as I was getting it. Like, what's going on?
I do think this show lends itself to a second watch through for sure.
Agreed, and that will happen.
I did watch when we first invited me to the podcast, I did go back and watch the first episode of the season. I don't think I could watch the whole thing with getting through everything and everything, but it was very interesting to knowing, for one,
where
where the twists are, and also the whole, they play loose with time and trying to figure out, okay, well, is this at this point now, and trying to piece those together. And you start to know, when young William is there, okay, it's in the past, or she's at least, if she's there, it's she's on her journey and maybe not seeing them right now, but...
And one of the cool things is like the little off comments the Man in Black will make, and then when you go through and rewatch it, and it's something little and minor that like William saw or did, or...
That reminds me when he meets Lawrence,
and
he says, my old friend Lawrence, he saves him from being hanged or something, and he says, we go way back, and you're like, oh, okay. And then you find out later on, you see when he first meets him, and they have
and
this
this
whole
treatment of
history
Lawrence is just so crazy
and
different.
It was so crazy.
I do have to say that the story mapping on this is brilliant, because they have to keep track of a lot, and they seem to be doing it, and the continuity, at least in the first season, maybe this is a talk for the second, but at least in the first season is pretty spot on. A couple things as we're moving toward the end of the season, we get a lot more killing and stuff. There's lots more people that kind of die, and there's all this, like the Confederados, they come through, and that's kind of on Dolores's journey. And we've already talked about how Maeve is ready to escape Westworld, but then she decides to go back into the park to find her daughter, and that she is actually the one given the map of the several parks. And then Ford tells Dolores and Bernard, he kind of confesses that it was basically him causing Arnold's death, and that now he's changed his mind. And then tandem to this, they decide to hold a function in the park to impress new investors, because that's one of the...
And force him to step down.
Yeah, and force Ford to step down, because they're trying to keep the long-term economic longevity of the park going, because there's that kind of reputation piece where Ford is one of the known faces of the company, and people are kind of seeing him as going crazy. Then you have a lot of starting to be, the safety protocols are disintegrating, the hosts are acting of their own accord, so now the corporation is trying to save what they see as something on fire. So they hold this function, at which point Ford stands up, he's ready to criticize the whole company and all of the board, and then the end of the season is Dolores coming up behind him and shooting him. Boom. And then they all start shooting everybody at the function.
It's so dope.
Well, I just love the fact that he had hyped up his new narrative, and they're all excited to see it.
Can we just give a quick shout out to the Lee Sizemore character, because I do enjoy him. He's the Englishman who writes the stories. He's real funny and arrogant and stuff.
He's actually one of my favorite characters.
He is arrogant. He's arrogant and stuff. That is understatement.
But he's also the comic relief, 9 times out of 10, so I enjoy him. Proceed.
I just love the fact that they're there to see this new narrative, and they're not realizing that the narrative he has planned is essentially all their deaths.
Yes. It is quite shocking.
I would almost have been happier, without foreshadowing too much into season 2, I almost feel like even though that was a cliffhanger ending, it was almost a great final ending too.
I thought the same thing, especially when Kyle was talking about the movie.
If this is it, that's great.
I thought the same thing especially when Kyle was talking about the way the movie ends. They could have ended the series right there, and it would have been fun.
You could have built it up in your head, the chaos that happens, and it would have been just as good. And my favorite part is the Man in Black just grinning. Even though he gets shot, he's grinning because this is what he really wants. It's the danger, the actual danger, and being able to actually live the world he's been pretending to live in.
He's got thrill issues.
One thing I really like.
He's got a lot more issues than that.
One thing I really liked about this scene, and I don't know if you probably caught this, Kylie, the music they played at that end scene is the prequel to what the season 2 is subtitled.
Yes.
All of the score is brilliant.
Well, we're going to get to that question. I'm asking it exactly how I wrote it.
Gets me.
So twist was awesome. I mean, end was awesome. You liked it. Usually when everybody likes it, they get into quietness.
I mean, yeah. No, I mean,
I feel like it was a 5-star ending.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree
Even
with
if
that
the whole
statement.
season wasn't a 5-star.
I agree with that statement because you want it to kind of come to some sort of climatic thing at the end, and it definitely, it served itself, and a lot of those things that happened, I wasn't expecting that either, so it was a nice way. I was happy that it led into other things, but I agree with them.
It would have been a good ending, because you end up knowing where each character came from, and you fully understanding them by that last episode.
True. And it was the ending that made me think to myself, well, where can this possibly go? Because I knew there was a second season. Like, where are they going from here?
They could have definitely wrapped it up with that ending. They did, like everyone said, tied up for the most part, or showed where the person had gone to and gotten to and accepted. The only character that I think they didn't really wrap anything up for was for Maeve, and that was why I knew there was going to be a second season, is because they had her turning away from freedom and going back into the danger.
Oh, right. That was kind of in that last episode.
Yeah, and that was
What
probably
you
the
doing?
one thing for sure that was going to bring up. That, and actually William's thrill need, actually seeing how he strives and fights in that world where he can actually be killed and hurt. And that was those two big drives to see the next season. So,
well, for sure. I mean, I should say that even though I had the reaction of where could it go, those were the two characters I wanted to know more about. Like, if it goes anywhere, those were the two that I connected with immediately and throughout the life of the show. Like, no matter where we land on season 2, which we'll talk about, those are still the two characters I care the most about. Hands down. So, the show uses music in a poignant way throughout the series. Both popular music, you can hear lilts of things like Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones, Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden, amongst others. There's classical music and repetitive thematic elements that are composed for the show's score. If you didn't already know, the scorist for Westworld is the same one as Game of Thrones. Yeah. What do you think of the use of music, and how much does it offer clues for you to understand what is going on? What did you think of that generally?
And my favorite was Paint It Black.
Oblivious.
I was not oblivious. We were a very big music family, and I was like, oh shit, this is awesome. Pardon my swearing.
Let one or two go by.
See, it's a mature show, so if you're listening to this podcast...
Yeah, really.
This is not explicitly rated, and Apple Podcasts will kick us off, okay?
They will not. But anyways, no. I think that they did that also very smartly. They were clearly, again, motivating you to think at least for me, think in certain directions about what was happening based on song choice. But then the way that he rescored it for the moments and the scenes was brilliant.
Well, and honestly, most of the popular songs that were retooled, at least in this season, not true in the second season, but in season 1, they come out of the player piano and the Mariposa.
Yep.
And so you're like, why? Why is this song?
They did it a lot in the previews for the episodes and whatnot too.
Yeah, they did. So no, okay. So just Hillary and I were intrigued by the music.
Music nerds.
After watching the first episode again, when you have Hector's gang rolling into town and you have the Paint It Black playing, that was really
cool, right?
Cool, especially knowing where they'd go to eventually, and kind of when you first rewatching it, you're not trying to take in all the new characters and everything. You know these characters, so you can enjoy it a little more, and you're not trying to focus on the scene. You can enjoy or pick out the details. So,
well, that's good to know. I probably need this then. So the music question. All right.
Kyle likes it. He's just
Jeremy's
not
looking at his phone.
The notes.
Okay. So how about this question? The show's main themes of the first season include, among others, the blurred line of reality, where life and sentience truly begin, and consciousness as a measurement of existence. How do you feel these themes played out in this first season, and what would you say the show's end game is, or what would you have thought it was as of the end of that season?
Well, I think we all knew Killer Robots was coming.
Yeah.
That was not.
I was going to say, if I watched the entire season and then none of the killer robot
very
stuff.
anticlimactic. The robots are all contained. It's fine.
Okay, so getting past the killer robots. What about the things that make them killer robots? Yeah, you don't care.
Did we not talk about that?
I think Kyle kind of hit on that a lot with the maze and stuff.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, what Kyle said, hashtag.
I mean, I think they did a really good job explaining these complicated concepts. I mean, for just a casual viewing audience.
For 10 episodes.
Yeah.
It's just 10 episodes. It feels like more, but it's just 10 episodes.
Yeah, and when you consider you're balancing that on a show that also has almost an equal amount of action, too, it's just amazing.
I think the show handles it very deftly in the first season. And if I am being honest, at the end, yes, killer robots, that was all happening. But I thought to myself, I really started to think, is this going to be like in Lost World when the T-Rex shows up on the mainland? So that was my honest first season reaction. But that's more of a season 2 foreshadowing.
I was going to say, I never really thought it was going to get... I was happy where it went. I mean, like I said, I think it hit all of the beats where it should have, and I think it landed where it should have landed.
I think Michael Crichton would have been proud of it. I mean, it hit his higher ideas.
Is he dead?
Yes, he died.
When?
Not too long before Jurassic World came out.
I was going to say, I think it's been a little while.
Yeah.
I must have missed that.
Yeah, he passed away. It holds up. The idea of all his books is these higher technological ideas about society and where we're going with technology, but wrapped up in entertainment. And that's what the show is. It's entertaining, but it still gets you all these ideas and all these things to think about.
Some of it translates better to film medium or TV medium than others, though. And I'm thinking of Sphere right now. That was terrible. I'm sorry. It might have been a good book, but...
But I mean, in like Westworld, it's the only movie he wrote. He never wrote it as a book. He wrote it as a movie, and he was so passionate about it. He wrote it himself with the idea that only he would direct it. Like, he was that passionate about this idea. And it just did okay when it came out. So I think that's the only reason he never made a movie himself again. But
very much.
So I mean, the fact that he was that passionate about it, I'm glad that it's come back, that it's cycled back around to it, and that more people are seeing it, and then going back and seeing the original movie.
Speaking of that, is Kyle the only one who's seen those things?
Yes.
The movie?
The
Westworld,
Yeah.
Future World, and then Westworld. They have one season of a TV show.
How many episodes is it?
It got canceled after like 9.
Oh, so it's almost as long as this one.
Yeah.
Are you interested in watching it?
I was interested in. Actually,
I will say the sequel movie, Future World, is so much smarter than season 2 of this show.
That's foreshadowing.
Somebody has
I
feelings.
just want to say that everyone's been foreshadowing season 2 a lot.
Yes.
I've been trying not to.
Thank you, Ben. He has followed directions.
I think they talk about a lot of the hosts becoming human more and more, and it seems like the more they become human, the more they act out on violence, and it kind of talks about the whole violence is part of humanity.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's what they, I think that's...
what they use. And yes, that's what they've learned, but it's also, I guess it's kind of how they've learned to deal with humanity.
And to be fair, being violence, the one thing they were told at the beginning they can't do is like Adam and Eve in the apple. He tells them you can't do something.
That's a good point.
Go and do it.
Yeah,
that's all they see around them, and they're not allowed to do it. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I mean, it also kind of goes back to Arnold too. When he built this park, he didn't have any idea that when people came in, they would just brutalize the host. Whereas Ford always knew. He thought they would just come and like have this fun Western adventure. So it shows his innocence too.
Yeah.
He created this thing not knowing what humanity would do to it.
Which was kind of naive if you think about it. You ever seen a kid with a magnifying glass and a bunch of ants?
Yeah.
He didn't.
Yes.
Fantastic
brilliant
points.
show.
I have nothing to add.
They were good on their own.
I know. That's pretty good. So I'm going to ask you some of the standard first look questions. This show was co-created by Jonathan Nolan, who also created Person of Interest, and Lisa Joy. This is Lisa's first TV project that she created, and this is the first project on which they've collaborated to create. Would you watch any other shows they make, individually or together? Have you watched Person of Interest? What did you think? Or will you watch it now as a result of watching Westworld? I will say, I'll just launch into this. We've covered Person of Interest on CPU. I did watch Person of Interest. I love Person of Interest. If you want another complex, you can't turn your brain off, fabulously acted.
You can't see it, but Samantha's nodding her head.
Yes, Samantha's nodding her head. Watch.
I'm trying to not interrupt, but yes, I agree with everything you're saying.
Yes, watch Person of Interest. Jim Caviezel, of course, Jesus from Passion of the Christ. And then, what's his real name?
Emerson.
Ben?
Yeah,
Ben
Michael
from
Michael
Lost.
Emerson, yep, who played Ben on Lost. I can't, they're
Sorry, Michael Emerson.
Yeah, Michael Emerson. They're so brilliant that it's not, I would not have necessarily watched Person of Interest because of Westworld. However, if Westworld even remotely intrigues you, watch Person of Interest. That's all about artificial intelligence. It's not Michael Crichton based, and it has definite derivative influences, but it takes it to some place completely and totally of its own making. And that's all I'll say. What'd you think? Would you watch anything else that these people make?
I mean, Jonathan Nolan writes a lot of comic book movies, so naturally I would probably watch those.
If it's comic book, you will. Otherwise, you
He's
don't
just
care.
saying it would probably happen.
Yeah.
It'll
He's
probably just
not-
happen naturally.
Just happens to be in the sphere. I mean, yeah, sure. I don't really discriminate or non-discriminate based on those things.
I'm like Hillary
I just-
in this. Like, if it looks like it's gonna pique my interest, I'll watch it. I don't
Yeah.
pay attention to who made it
Yeah.
until after the fact.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not going to be like, oh, he did this, so I must go to this other one.
I'm one of those people.
Well, that's fine.
J.J. Abrams' name was on this. I was like, oh, gotta watch it.
I will be fair. J.J. Abrams did give I do like a lot of the things he's done, and he's done a good job on them. But I don't particularly seek out different producers or directors just because, oh, well, they did it, so I know I'm going to love it. I'm much more of the idea of, like, everyone else kind of, I seem to agree. If it piques my interest, the story,
The
and
genre.
the genre is a big thing, I'll definitely watch it or give it a chance. So.
How does Westworld compare to other TV shows, generally other science fiction TV, or if you can compare it to Westerns in the TV realm?
Well, I would compare it to this other movie called Westworld.
That doesn't count! You can't do that, Kyle!
Okay, I'll compare it to this obscure TV show that got canceled.
Same answer! Aside from the things that share its name.
Jurassic Park.
That's what it compares to?
Yes.
Is that good or bad?
Good. Obviously. If you don't like Jurassic Park, what's wrong with you?
That's a fair question.
I hope you mean like the
That's
first
a-
one.
that's
Oh,
a
yeah,
separate
Jurassic Park,
conversation.
not the
What about
franchise.
that?
Jurassic Park.
Samantha, yeah, true. Samantha, what did you just say?
I was just saying that's a separate conversation. We don't have time to debate the merits of Jurassic Park.
Do you at least like the first movie?
No.
Oh.
That's why I'm saying we don't have time for this.
Do you not like Joy?
Oh
To be fair, Jurassic Park is an extremely watered down version of this.
Which was super awesome for 1993.
Here's the masses.
Samantha just alluded to we are a TV podcast.
Yes, I've been told in the past we can't discuss movies, so
Unless it's related to the TV show, which Kyle's Uber discussion on the original 1973 Westworld is
okay.
acceptable. So,
There's precedent.
Plus, it's all Michael Crichton created, so.
yes, that's true, but okay. I'm going to avoid the are you going to keep watching because we have a season 2 in this series. Is there anything else you want to say about season 1 before we finish this discussion?
I mean, I think it serves the genre really well, and it made me definitely excited to watch the next season.
I would recommend season 1 to anybody. I mean, even
That
if
was
they
my next
weren't, even if they
question,
weren't planning, if they didn't want to like go through multiple seasons, season 1 is like a roller coaster ride. It's great. I would recommend it to anybody.
And stands alone.
Yes.
So would you recommend Westworld after season 1? That's the question.
Yes. Especially particularly if you're into the genre, but I think it could definitely reach people who are less familiar with the genre as well.
It has a wide appeal.
Yes!
Okay.
Sure.
I feel like I said this in the last podcast we did. I think if you just watch season 1, you're good. You're golden. And watch season 2 at your own risk.
That's for the season 2 podcast. But I see you're going after 13 Reasons Why. Ben, how do you feel?
I would definitely recommend it. It has different levels of things for different people. There's the high-end intellectual, and then there's the cool action scenes and the compelling characters. So pretty much anyone can find something that will pull them in, and they might even find something more that they didn't expect they'd enjoy about it.
I agree with Ben's answer 100%. I think it does. It has broad appeal, and any random TV watcher could find something to like about Westworld. In its first season, extra special shout out to the music nerds, because I think you will also enjoy Westworld's first season quite a lot because of all the things you get to hear in the process.
But I agree with one of your original statements is you have to be ready to invest yourself.
You do. Absolutely. If I was recommending it, I would probably say it's slow, it's complicated, and you can't be on your phone while you're watching this show.
Get
you
a
just
notebook.
can't.
Get a notebook.
And
write
plot
down
out the
points,
multiple
start
timelines.
pointing them towards each other, and you'll just have.
Have you ever played Myst or Riven?
Oh,
This
God.
is the watching equivalent of playing Myst or Riven. My feelings.
I concur.
See, there's all
I
sorts
played
of
that for
nerdiness.
about 15 minutes, and then I uninstalled it, so I can't say that's the same.
You know there's books, right, for Myst?
Yes, I do.
Big tangent, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole world. There's a whole fan base for
Read
that.
the lore.
There's lore. Well, since we've talked out season 1, we'll have to get to season 2. But before we do that, I want to thank Jeremy, Kyle, Samantha, Hillary, and Ben for joining me to start this catch-up mini-series to talk about Westworld. And because we've done that, and we've done this little talk, it's now time for the end credits. Couch Potatoes Unite! Was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, which is really another way of saying executively produced by me, Kylie Piette. My associate producers are Krista Pennington and Selene Rezmer. I edit this podcast, and our logo is by Rebecca Wallace. Our marketing graphic artist is Krista. Our theme song was written by Sarah Milbratz and sung by Sarah, Amy McDaniel, and Kelsey Rezmer. Kelsey played the keyboard, Ian McDonough played the bass, Christian Somerville played the guitar, and the whole kit and caboodle was engineered and produced by Kyle Aspinall and Christian. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts. Give us stars, give us comments, give us reviews. Let us know how we're doing. Send us a message. We might just read it on the podcast. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, what we should keep, what we should toss. You know how it goes. And if you have suggestions on shows we might consider, contact us at our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, where we have a guest book, by email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, or via our social media, Facebook, Twitter at CPU Podcast, and Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite. Though, of course, we add new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time. We always have several more new episodes coming down the pike. Just listen to our intros, and if you miss old episodes or want to know in general what we cover, just find us. We are everywhere and searchable wherever you look for things on the internet. You can search for us, or you can subscribe on our website, our channels, our social media accounts. Stay up on our new events and episodes. Until the next time, all available seasons of Westworld are available to stream on HBO Go or HBO Now, which means you can probably pay extra and access the series via other places like Amazon Prime and Hulu. None of them are sponsoring us. This is just informative pieces of information should you take our recommendation to watch Westworld. In the meantime, our Westworld panel will next reconvene very shortly, in fact, to talk Season 2 and Part 2 of our 2-part catch-up miniseries. So until next time, until next episode, new episodes are published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching,